And I think what we have to do is, in some ways, as an industry, just make that moment more obvious for people so that, our value prop is so clear that people just raise their hand more easily for our products. And when they do, the friction is so low that you're coming out the other side with something that serves your needs. Hi, this is Yaron Ben-Zvi, CEO of Haven Technologies, and this is the future of insurance.
Business is anything but usual these days, but with VPay's claim payment solution, you can replace checks, reduce costs, boost e-payment adoption, and start realizing savings in just 45 days. Easy, safe, and smart. VPay, now a part of Optum Financial.
Yaron, thank you for joining me for an episode of the show. It's great to sit down with you.
Great to be here with you.
It's a nice chance to branch out of PNC a little bit. So actually, funny enough, same day we're recording this, I also recorded a conversation with Don Jones from MassMutual. Interesting little confluence of life insurance and kind of MassMutual universe going on right now. But
you're getting your life and annuity fixed today.
Yeah. Now, like from my consulting background, I now would have qualified as an expert in life and annuities just by having two conversations. Anyway, tell us a little bit about what is Haven? Give us the backstory and maybe a bit of what sparked you to build what you guys are building.
Yeah, absolutely. So Haven is really started with Haven Life, which is, I think, what those in the life industry know us for. And that started quite a while ago now. I'm scared to say I've been doing this for about 8 years now.
Wow.
And the vision there was really just to start with the customer. It was, I was looking around at the time at the life industry, mostly because I had to buy a policy and I experienced what the state of the industry was. And I got interested in it just because I had a tech background. And, at the time, I was kind of noticing and realizing that a lot of kind of technology hadn't really kind of permeated its way into the life space to start making a difference in terms of customer experience and how products were being delivered. And that seemed like an opportunity. So I actually got licensed as an agent.
Wow.
That was my first step in my journey into this industry. Tried to sell a few policies, realized how hard it was. And then ended up starting a company since my background was in fintech, and that's kind of what I knew how to do. And Haven Life was really born out of that. And the vision from the very beginning was just to simplify the life insurance experience and to expand access to a broader base set of customers, really with technology as the kind of driving wedge for that. And we started out in one state and grew the business over several years, and have built a lot of technology over the course of the years. And now, kind of 8 years into this, we kind of have a full suite of technology that we're using, not just to power Haven Life, but also we've been using to power parts of our parent company that is MassMutual. And as you know, Brian, we kind of recently announced also that we're now using the technology and commercializing it to offer it to other carriers in the industry. So Haven Technologies, where I sit today, is really about taking our experience and our expertise that we've built over 8 years, in the life space across channels, and using it to kind of push the industry forward with the aim of helping it to transform and grow even bigger.
So I want to dig into that, but can we step back just for a minute when you talked about your background, fintech?
Sure.
Specifically, what kinds of things were you coming from that? Because I'm always curious about who looks at the insurance problems, what their perspective is, and why. What was it in what you were doing that led you to feel like maybe there's a better way, or I want to dig deeper. I want to leave what I'm doing and dig deeper into this particular thing.
Yeah. So my background actually started in media, believe it or not. That's kind of where I got into tech. I was the first employee at a company called Oxygen Media.
Oh yeah.
Which you probably know as the cable television company for women now. And very early on, what they were trying to do was to kind of build not just a, if you will, an old media company, but a new media company where
Yeah.
the internet and technology was kind of a big part of that. And so that was kind of my entrance into technology, and got really interested in tech, and led a bunch of their early on back in the day was interactive television initiatives and video on demand. That was kind of where TV was going back then.
Yeah. Which is still early then. I mean, they were definitely on the forefront of that, like mixing in the web experience. And I guess I don't even think we had apps yet. Like, was there an
Yeah.
iPhone at that point? Maybe not yet.
No, yeah, I'm dating myself. This was like the first internet bubble, right? So this was, the world of pets.com and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it was, we used to do things like there were, set-top boxes that were just getting interactive capabilities. So
Yeah.
like you could, back then everybody thought the future of TV would be like you could order a pizza,
Yeah.
um, by clicking a button on your remote.
That was part of
Yeah.
TiVo's like monetization story, was the pizza one. And that was like the only example they came up with.
Which was actually that was such a great learning ecosystem for me, right? Because you kind of quickly learn that, like, it turns out, whatever it was, 70% of people watch TV while they're surfing their laptops anyway already. And it's much easier for them to order a pizza either by pulling out their phone or their laptop than it
Yeah.
was on the TV, right? So that's where I kind of really learned this whole like customer focus, customer behavior kind of mindset in some ways. And coming out of media, it was also where I kind of fell in love with this, this idea of like using technology and within industries that are in transition, right? Media was very much kind of going through that, and music
Yeah.
at the time. And I don't think I could articulate that way back then, but it kind of ended up being a theme throughout my entire career.
Yeah. Well, and they're like media, especially, it's purely about engagement. Like that's the most important, and social media by extension, that's all about engagement. So you look at insurance, which historically has had so much lower engagement in the product. You buy it, and then, on neither side is either one trying to talk to the other. Like, don't poke the bear is kind of the mentality for most carriers. For the customer, you don't want to interact with your insurance company because it means something's bad, right? Either there's a problem logistically, tactically with the policy, administratively, or something horrible happened. So no one wants to engage and is interested in engaging and didn't want to engage in the purchase in the first place. It's such a night and day kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point, right? I mean, that's in many ways the defining characteristic of not just insurance, but in this little niche that we occupy, which is life insurance, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I always look at the PNC folks with some envy. At least engagement there is driven by the fact that everyone legally has to have, an auto policy if they're going to drive. And on the life side, we don't have that. So engagement was one of the big things I learned. But candidly, also the other was just friction, which is kind of a different lens on the same idea. But you got to make things easy for people, right? And when we were thinking about, like, at the time, interactive television and video on demand, it's just like it had to be really plain and simple. And that was kind of another learning, because we tried all kinds of things at the time, which was fun, right? We were experimenting, but it was the simple things that always worked.
Yeah, it's a great learning ground for what you ended up getting into. But you said you had fintech experience. So how do you get from media to that?
Yeah, it was kind of a big shift. So I actually went to business school first as kind of my career transition, and out of business school decided that I would do something a little bit different. So I really joined a startup at the time, it was kind of the research space. So it was looking at conversations online and mining them for kind of customer insight for big companies.
Yeah.
So that fell in love with kind of the very early stage startup thing there as well. And then ultimately ended up in fintech, because kind of seeing all these companies where I was an early employee from the ground up, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do this myself. So I partnered up with someone, and we started an early robo advisor. And that was my first foray into fintech.
Yeah.
And actually sort of learned a bunch of the asset management sort of game and kind of the regulatory world. I got broken into what it was like to deal with that, and that was the gateway, if you will, into insurance.
And was that the context you were in when you were trying to get life insurance and were like, this is complex, I want to do better?
Yeah. So I kind of spent a few years and then sold, the company that I'd started in the robo space. And then right around that time, really got interested in life insurance because my wife and we had our first kid, and I got
Really, why?
Yeah, my dad was like, okay, you got to now go start a 529 and buy a life insurance policy,
Right.
which, I consider myself a relatively educated, knowing person, but I'm not sure that it would have occurred to me without him.
Yeah.
I did what I always do, right? So I was the guy who I had just built a robo. I was pretty familiar with tech. I went online and I was like, buy a life insurance policy. And there was no doubt in my mind that there would have to be a way for me to do this just online and get it done in a number of days, right? I was already like, there was like Betterment was already out there. Like everybody was trading online. It was like clearly this has permeated every part of financial services. And it took me hours to make sense of what I found. It just took me there was lots of people saying that you could buy it online, but no one actually.
Not really.
They were just quoting you online, but it turns out what they were quoting you had nothing to do with you. And then, I was used to like the world where like you pick up a prospectus of a fund or something that you want to, invest in, and you read about it. And so I was literally trying to find a life insurance policy that was blank that I could read and understand. It was like, I couldn't get one.
Yeah.
So I had all these questions that I just couldn't answer. And that's what led to, maybe there's something here.
I don't know if you're technically like a software engineer by background when you say you're in the tech space, but I feel like going out and getting licensed to sell the stuff is such an engineer's answer, is like, this seems impossible. Well, you tell a regular person, they're like, oh, well, just give up and have someone do it for me. Whereas an engineer is like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do this myself. Like engineers just always, it's impossible right now. Right. And then they'll go out and figure the path. So you're not an engineer, but you went and engineered it anyway.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but I do feel like I've got like an entrepreneurial bent in me that's just like, let me just go see what I can do about it. And I will say I took a bunch of like coding classes early on because I was, the business guy trying to understand technology, and I think I just wasn't smart enough, honestly, to kind of go down that road. But I always kind of loved it, and I always felt like it helped me a lot in terms of, I don't know, just a mindset to like solving problems, and also to being able to sort of communicate around technology in a way.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure it helped a lot with internally and externally and understanding, trying to innovate from a tech standpoint. So
don't ask me to go back to my Java though. That would be a little ugly for all of us.
Yeah, that's no problem. I used to do web development, and I certainly would never attempt to do that now. It was like 20 years ago plus, actually, maybe like 25, when the web was still like, people were referring to it as like this internet thing. Like it wasn't really sure how it was playing out yet. Anyway, so you from getting licensed to sell the stuff to building actually a solution to, at that time, it was sales. It was like MGA kind of model. You weren't trying to create a full stack life insurer, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I got licensed, and I started to learn about the industry. And at the time, I kind of paired up with one of the CTOs of my previous companies, and we effectively built like an MGA type model, quoting multiple carriers and all of that online. And quickly, what I realized was a lot of the just pain and friction, again, in the process was at the carrier level, right? It was through the product design, the underwriting, a lot of those components. And that's where a lot of the kind of the interesting problem set was. So started to think about what would it look like if we could really control and have more say into that entire life cycle of the customer sort of experience. And that led me to partnering up with MassMutual and ultimately bringing that company in-house here to grow it within the sort of walls of a carrier.
So how do you make those changes then? Because it's not like if you're following an agency model, like there's only so much of that you own, and then the product, the underwriting behind it, all the things that it sounds like we're creating the pain are out of your control. So how do you get to a place where you can fix enough of those things or far enough into those things that you solve the problem? Would it have been possible to do that without the relationship you ended up building with MassMutual, or did you sort of have to get inside to be able to reach far enough to make those changes?
Yeah, I think we had to be inside, and I think that the partnership with MassMutual at the time really definitely enabled that. Because you think about it, that's really what opens up the door to having the conversations about how do you create a policy and optimize it for digital, right? For a digital experience, right? Because your filings, your applications, the way you ask questions,
Yeah.
the way that sort of flows through to underwriting, all of those things need to be looked at, right? Down to the level of like historically, right? Life insurance applications, they're written for advisors or agents to sit down with customers to discuss, but like generally they weren't written for a customer to understand it by themselves, right? So
Yeah.
there's so many like details and things that just need to be rethought. And within MassMutual, we were able to kind of hit reset and build a term policy from the ground up that really was in many ways optimized for the customer and the mindset that I happen to have, represented as a customer.
So it did take a new product. Was it just because the forms were changing, or did the construct of things need to be adjusted? Like what are the levers that needed to change to make it fit in this new, a new customer interaction model?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is kind of what you would expect when you're trying to build a direct channel. The big things are making it customer friendly, right? How does someone understand and can navigate your entire process, either themselves or with the help of kind of, a phone sort of customer rep, but in a different way.
Yeah.
The second thing was just stripping it down, right? So one of the things is just really kind of simplifying product so that there's fewer options, because the more options you throw at customers, the more confusing it can be and the more they have to answer questions they may not have the answers to. So I think simplifying it to the core set of needs that would really effectively serve your customers, those two things are really the heart of it. And it sounds in many ways simpler than it is, but when you start to go through a typical, fully underwritten term life policy, they tend to be, historically have a lot of those options and things that weren't meant to serve the customer in that way.
Is it something you can do starting from what exists and like, oh, let's not ask this question, or let's take this option out? Or is it ground up, like clean sheet of paper, start from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I would say a lot of it historically, and when I look at the market today, I don't know what you think, but a lot of it is addition by subtraction in a lot of ways. So there isn't, not that there isn't room for the other type of innovation, right? And simplification. But I think oftentimes, there's well understood models within the regulator world of like what a life policy or a DI policy or whatever it is needs to look like. There's well understood risk models, so a lot of it is kind of starting within what's there and then thinking about how can I sort of chisel around the edges or improve. I do think over time there will be kind of this other more emergent thing, which is starting from scratch, how do things look, but I think in some ways that's a little bit farther out.
I do find maybe it's different in life versus P&C, but so often you see, an existing carrier who's got say 120 questions in their app, trying to get that down to be a more direct sellable kind of experience. They'll work, lock themselves in a room for days and come out at 80 questions. And they feel like, that was a ton of work, really hard to do. But they really pared it down. And then you get a startup selling the same product who didn't have any questions to begin with, all this access to third-party data and other ways of processing that and modeling it. And there are 3 questions or maybe 4. I feel like that in P&C, that seems to be like you come at it one way or the other and you land at extremely different answers. Maybe it's different in life, but I don't know. I mean, you've lived it.
That is interesting. I think ultimately it becomes a little bit of all of those things end up as hybrids in some way.
Yeah.
And I think what's challenging is, starting from a blank sheet of paper can be really useful. And then you end up sort of adding things back in because you kind of end up in roadblocks around, well, actually, like my price looks like this unless I ask these additional 5 questions.
Yeah.
And so, I actually think what you do is you end up, at least in the life space I found, in highly similar spaces, just making slightly different choices about what you're willing to compromise on along the way.
Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting. Like there are definitely differences between the two sides, life versus P&C. I was talking to another term life startup outside of the US, and it's a company called Dead Happy. One of the founders on the show, and I love their name. I can't get over that. But he was saying, I said about the product, like term, does it have to be term to be able to be self-bought or, direct sold? And, so he was sort of going into why he feels like that probably is a prerequisite on the simplicity, the understanding, to not have to go to an advisor. But I'm always curious, like, what's your take on that? Is moving life into a direct space, simplifying things, does that inherently limit the product suite that you could offer? Does it need to be a term product, or do you think that's where we're at right now and we just haven't solved for some of the things that reduce that complexity or allow the buyer to navigate it themselves, or with a lighter touch than maybe in the past?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. I do think there's only certain products and sold in certain ways that make sense for a direct market. I don't know that it's just term, but I will say simple products that can be well understood and researched work well. Like term works well for a few reasons, right? Number one is it's kind of cash friendly typically on the pocket, right?
Yeah.
So it's relatively affordable. You can get a good amount of coverage. That's really important for a direct space. The second thing that's really important is there's a lot of that's kind of where the market is in a lot of ways broadly. So if a customer's at home and you think 70 to 80% of them start their journey with life insurance by going to Google and putting in life insurance, the first thing that they're going to understand and learn about in many ways is term insurance, or maybe term versus whole, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of kind of just like history and education out there about like what term is. And it sort of helps with reducing friction in the buying process. And I will say the last thing is you can sort of make it relatively simple in terms of choices for people.
Yeah.
Like it's a good product to not overwhelm people with choices. So I think it fits really well with the direct model. I think as the broader market shifts and as consumers get more educated, it doesn't mean that's the only place where it'll go.
Yeah. As somebody who has both term and whole policies, or I think whole, I definitely like, there's one side that I get as an insurance person, and the other side, like, thank God I have someone to talk to because I don't understand it. And like, maybe I shouldn't admit that, but I don't. And like, for me, it's about trusting the person, and happens to be MassMutual, but yeah, just, like, it's just complicated stuff, and we're solving for a complicated need. So I understand, like, just like large commercial versus personal auto, like much more complicated need. There's a lot of things to navigate. I would say a CFO is not going to pop online, put in their corporate card and buy a like $880,000 workers' comp policy for their like tens of thousands of employees, right? So to your point, it's a different buyer, different situation.
And that'll always be there, so, and
Yeah.
it's funny, it's like a few years ago, I feel like we were having this conversation about like, you know, in the future, will agents go away and things of that sort. And I think that everyone's moved beyond that, because no,
Yeah.
they're absolutely critical, especially to those more complex products. And similarly, direct, I think, will do well with simple products that can cover a different type of need for a different type of customer.
Yeah. I still hear that debate from time to time. It's the first thing I heard my first day in the industry, and I still hear it today. But yeah, I don't think in any space, I don't think actually they're going to completely go away. Like everything, the way we work, what we do will be different, because it's not like it was 5 years ago either. So why would you think, it's going to either like fall off a cliff or stay exactly as it is? It's just not reality. You talked about this lightly, but can you share a little bit more about, during ITC, this news came out about Haven Tech, and like the platform is now a product. What is the platform? What is it enabling? Who's that for, and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we did over the last several years is we happened to have built out a lot of technology, and that was really not with the idea that we were ever going to sell it. It was with the idea that we were solving the business problems that we had. And that was for Haven Life, but then also we were using the same technology for MassMutual's parts of MassMutual's business as well. So what we announced at ITC was the fact that we're taking this technology platform and really offering it to other carriers now as Haven Technologies. So this new company that is going to take SaaS, software as a service, and really bring that to the life space in a big way. And it's really what we're offering and putting out there is kind of everything we've built, as I say, from quote to claim. So we've done a lot of work on, there's kind of four main components. The first being the application taking and everything that comes up front at the top of the funnel, if you will.
Yep.
The second is we've kind of built our own underwriting platform, which combines what we say the best of both straight through algorithmic type of underwriting as well as human underwriting. The third component is a policy admin system. And the last component is kind of a suite of actuarial tools that kind of help support all the other three and kind of help you effectively use those other modules. So taken together, those are modules that we're offering either separately or together, but we're pretty excited about the potential of that and the fact that it's kind of this new modern system.
Yeah. And the Haven Life side of it continues on.
Yes.
Yes.
So Haven Life will continue on as an agency with its mission of, direct life insurance sales, and Haven Technologies will really be focused on, being a SaaS company and commercializing this technology for reaching lots of customers with many different carriers.
I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but I'm curious, and you could say, no, we can't talk about it, but I am really, so I've been at or with a number of companies that have created some technology in-house that they're really proud of. It's been really helpful to them. And then that debate comes up is, well, should we commercialize this? One of them I thought actually could have been a great idea. The other one is like, this is a terrible system. You should not be doing that. And they didn't. I think enough of their internal people were revolting against the system that they realized like, it's not going to do so well. But that is a tough decision, because if that's like your secret sauce, if that's where your competitive advantage comes from, should you be putting that out to market or not? Or was that a debate that you guys had to look at? Or I know you said it wasn't what you went in intending to do, but how do you get to that place and then say, actually, this is the right answer, even though like maybe that is part of your competitive advantage? And does that give something up? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. So, and I really can't or shouldn't
It's
speak
fine.
for MassMutual, but I can give you kind of my Haven Tech perspective on
Yeah.
it, which is, look, ultimately the reason we exist and the reason I'm excited is that I know and we know that there's going to be a lot of investment in the life space over the next 10 years in digital and transformation and really sort of kicking the industry forward, because let's be frank, we've been lagging, right? We've been lagging P&C, we've been lagging other parts of financial services, all of that. And so it happens to be that we believe we have a really good solution that fits that. And so and by the way, we believe that the more people that use the solution, the better it will be for all boats.
Yeah.
So I think it's really kind of as simple as that. And if not us, right, other people will rise to fit that need. That investment is going to be done one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a brilliant idea. I don't always think that about moves like that, but I get it in this case. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. But yeah,
even if you are, I appreciate it.
No, but I also recognize those aren't decisions that people come to lightly. Like that is it's a big thing to weigh. So I'm sure there was a lot of strong reasoning behind it. Where do things go from here for the life insurance space? I mean, from my perspective, you're spot on. It's hard for things to lag behind P&C, but life has done that from an insurtech standpoint. There's fewer unicorns, there's less activity, there's less VC dollars flowing into life. So I mean, P&C has, I think, had a renaissance of new solutions. We still got a long way to go. But life's got, more room to move, but some cool things going on. So what do you think happens in the life space?
Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of typically talk about it is in the three buckets of kind of players, if you will. So I think there's technology, there's carriers, and then there's distribution, right? And I think on the tech side, we'll see more technology spend. We'll also see more tech players, quite frankly, in the life insurance space, offering everything from transformation services to digital and a lot of data, I would say, and analytics type of solutions. I think the carriers are going to start accelerating a lot of their transformation initiatives and are going to be looking, as they are across channels and products, for new ways to grow and new types of products to put out there. And I think the distribution, as you see with, already in the space, will just continue to get more complex, right? There's going to be even more ways to distribute that everyone needs to think about across different types of channels and in different types of ways. But I think if you put all of those things together, what I usually describe it as, it's kind of like there's a wall and there's lots of big holes poked at it. And taken together, that's actually becomes something really meaningful and transformational for the entire ecosystem. Because when you now have, more players with different perspectives on a new sort of core technology, the ways that you can put those two different parts of the value chain together really changes. And I think what you'll end up seeing ultimately is that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. And the result of that is going to be more customers being served. I think life is going to grow again in terms of number of customers served, and new players that are emerging as big players in the market. So I think it's going to be a really interesting, I wouldn't call it disruptive period, but I'll call it a accelerated pace of transformation over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I think that's a good way to look at it, and a positive story. I mean, there's still a huge coverage gap. So there's lots of room for growth in life without everyone just doing a share stealing game, which there's plenty of that in P&C. So that's an advantage you guys can't have, is there's lots of people who don't have cover right now. And if not for those, well-intentioned parental conversations with us when we hit these life moments, for me, it was being on a very bumpy flight, flying home when my wife was like 7 months pregnant or something, and we were closing on a house. And I was like, wait a second, what happens if this doesn't work out? I have nothing. So my dad didn't have to say anything. As soon as I landed, went through the same kind of, process you did, and wasn't able to land anywhere. So I had to reach out for help. And this is around the same time for us because our kids are about the same age. But yeah, I think things are changing and there's lots of room to start expanding the market. So I appreciate what you guys are building. I don't know if I was about to cut you off. You look like you were to say something.
No, I think your story really resonates with me, and I think what we have to do is, in some ways, as an industry, just make that moment more obvious and for people, so that our value prop and is so clear that people just raise their hand more easily for our products. And when they do, the friction is so low that as soon as you raise your hand, you're coming out the other side with something that serves your needs. So
yeah,
that's kind of the challenge that we both have, is that we all have, I think, as an industry. And I think in many ways, despite I think what are still some challenges on the P&C side, I think they've done a job that we can follow as an industry.
Yeah. Yaron, thank you for the time. I know you're super busy, so I appreciate this, and sharing quite a bit about the journey and some of the things that you guys are working on, and even taking my curveball question. I know, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to Yaron for joining me for that conversation. It's always fascinating for me to hear about a space outside of what I deal with on the day-to-day, and especially some really innovative things that have been going on there, like what Haven's been doing. Cool to hear his backstory and the things he did beforehand, but who responds to not being able to buy something with like, you know what, I'm going to get licensed so I can sell this too. You think about what he must have learned by trying to be a customer, by getting licensed, by trying to sell it, what his understanding of the real problem and how people are trying to navigate it is. That really stands out to me. So I imagine that just fed into what they were building at Haven so well and really set them up for the success that they've had. So congratulations to Yaron, to the whole team at Haven, Haven Life, Haven Technologies. And I wish them a lot of luck with what they're now offering out to the market that could help make some meaningful change in providing for this coverage gap that is out there for, families that don't have coverage, that are exposed, for individuals, for anyone really who, especially in the US, lots of markets, life insurance is not universally held. A lot of people don't understand it, think it's super expensive, and it certainly can be, but it doesn't have to be. And the products can be understandable. So I'm hoping that they're really successful. I think it's going to enable a lot of innovation and change in the industry. And Yaron said like 5 to 10 years, it takes new tech to be able to enable that within that time period. So I wish them all the best. So thank you to Yaron for joining for this episode. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. Thank you to VPay from Optum Financial for sponsoring this episode. And I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.